Co-chair Eric Christensen is also a lawyer and partner in Carecross Hempelman law firm. I had to practice that one. Over the years, his practice has focused on energy, clean tech, and natural resource industry. This means Washington's largest public utility districts, innovative independent power producers, and emergency energy-related technology companies rely on his counsel. As you can imagine, Eric was fully utilized in 2000 to 2001 during the Enron and energy crisis whole debacle, full tilt boogie for him. From the University of Kansas to Stanford to Seattle 4, Eric is all about supporting good energy. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Hello, and on behalf of the Sustainability Committee, I want to wish you all a happy Earth Day. And it's also the 100th birthday of the National Park Service, and we're really happy to be helping to celebrate that. The Sustainability Committee concerns itself with environmental and sustainability issues, both locally, all the way from the Find Your Parks event. Please see the flyer on your table, all the way to international sustainability issues in conjunction with the Rotary International sustainability effort. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you 3 speakers at once. We're sort of doing an unusual collaboration among our speakers. The first speaker is Stephen Streufert, who's the director of Nature Bridge Olympic, formerly known as Olympic Park Institute. And my daughter Grace is here, who's an alum of OPI. The Nature Bridge Olympic runs a science-based environmental education course at their beautiful campus out in Olympic National Park. This year, they'll provide education to about 5,000 students, as well as teachers and adults and families. And they've been doing it since 1987. The second speaker is Rob Smith, who is the Northwest Regional Director for the National Parks Conservation Association, which is the leading nonprofit organization devoted to addressing environmental and sustainability issues in our nation's national parks. Rob boasts that on his journey in from Bainbridge Island every day, he can see 4 national parks. So bonus points for anybody who can identify all 4. Last, but certainly not least, Chip Jenkins is a 30-year veteran of the National Park Service, which in that journey has taken him everywhere from roaming the backcountry of North Cascades National Park as a backcountry ranger, all the way to roaming the halls of Congress as a special assistant to the Secretary of Interior. He's now the Deputy Regional Director for the National Park Service here in the Pacific Northwest, and we're thrilled to have all 3. Gentlemen, take it away.
Can you tell which one of us is with the Park Service? All right. Yeah, my 14-year-old son said, okay, day like today, you were talking to 200 people about the national parks and you're doing it in a windowless conference room? Sounds like a really smart idea, Dad. Hey, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be invited to be here and to speak with all of you today about your national park system. We're going to do a tag team here. We'll move along pretty quickly. Your club has a reputation for asking really good questions, so our game plan here is to have time to be able to take some of those really good questions. All right. So let's just start off with when you say national parks, what comes to mind, right? For many different people, it conjures up different images, spectacular landscapes. For other folks, it may mean some of the most significant parts of our history. For some people, the national park means some of the fights that have gone in to preserve our heritage, like the fight to create Redwood National Park, preserve it from overlogging and the disappearing of the redwood trees. For others, it may mean the fight to preserve the values of our country and actually to hold the fabric of the Union together. For many, the national parks are the spectacular monumental landscapes that define the geography. For others, it is the monumental ideals that people have fought for over time. All of these are part of your national park system. You see, there are 411 units of the national parks, and we're going to spend just a few minutes here not engaged in a travel log, which maybe you're expecting the pretty pictures, but actually what we want to do is extend an invitation for you to join us in your parks and your centennial. So 2016 marks the 100th anniversary of the creation of the National Park Service, the organization that I'm a part of that's charged with stewarding your parks in partnership with many other people. We're not throwing a birthday party, rather we're looking to the future. We want to honor the past, but we want to work for the future. We want to create and connect a new generation of park visitors, supporters, and advocates. And we do that through a variety of different methods and with a variety of different partners. Part of what's going on for 2016 is actually an international campaign to help define the breadth and depth of your national park system so that people understand the 411 units and what they embody and the invitation to come and enjoy and learn from them. And let's just take a little bit of a moment here.
America, land of the free, home of the brave. It's the greatest country on earth. And if the good old US of A doesn't warrant a celebration, then really, what does? But we're not talking about rolling out the barbecue and running around with sparklers. It's not a once-a-year thing. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Because a single day just isn't enough. We're talking a 2+ year extravaganza dedicated to a single idea, America's greatest idea, the National Park Service. And in 2016, it's turning 100. Our National Park Service is revered by all, open to all, and enjoyed by all. There are no blue parks or red parks, only American parks. From iconic giants to 400 other sites dedicated to everything from history and recreation to human ingenuity and the struggle for justice. As part of the festivities, we'll be kicking off a movement to support America's national parks, a nationwide crusade that will introduce the parks to a whole new generation of Americans. In fact, literally redefining what the word park means. Is it possible to redefine such a word? We think so, and we're going to prove it with Find Your Park, a mass awareness, multifaceted program that will demonstrate that a park, a national park, is way more than most of us previously imagined. Find Your Park will be everywhere, from traditional and multicultural media outlets like TV, print, and out-of-home, to must-be-there platforms like digital, social engagement, and activation. We'll be educating people on the mission of the National Park Service and its official nonprofit partner, the National Park Foundation, while inviting each and every American to find their park, be it a place, a feeling, a sense of pride, a lesson learned, a playground of epic proportions, or perhaps even all of the above. There will be challenges, discoveries, and invitations for people to submit their own stories. Find Your Park will touch grade schools, universities, and local communities, both urban and rural, across the country. Corporate partners will also be getting involved like never before. Celebrity talent? We'll have plenty of that too. An A-list of musicians, actors, artists, and authors. Does it warrant a parade? You bet. And we've got it covered. A TV series? That's in the works too. An IMAX movie? Why not? Quite simply, Find Your Park will infiltrate and work its glorious tendrils into every corner of pop culture and beyond. The question really is, why wouldn't you want to be part of this unique time in the continually evolving story of America? Join the movement by supporting the national parks. It's gonna be big. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be the celebration of the century. It starts now, and with your help, it'll propel us forward for another 100 years.
So let's just talk a little bit about the invitation. So what's going on in 2016? Honestly, too much to go through right now. There are activities and events going on in parks and communities, just like you've heard about in terms of the cleanup at the Arboretum on Saturday, and activities going on all around the country. But let's touch on some highlights. So starting on January 1st, the first day of 2016, the Rose Parade, with 700,000 participants, was focused on the Park Service Centennial. We set up a visitor center there, welcome many, many people to come and learn about their parks. We've got IMAX, a private company, has developed the newest film, which is the National Park Adventure. You can see it here at the Pacific Science Center. We're expecting 5 million people to see this film domestically, and another 5 million people abroad will be watching the film. This week marks, by presidential proclamation, it's National Park Week. and a whole series of activities that are going on, including Saturday and Sunday. We'd like to invite you out actually on Sunday to join the director of the National Park Service, John Jarvis. He's out from Washington, D.C. He'll be at Jefferson Park in Seattle doing a Healthy Parks, Healthy People event at 2 p.m. A great activity for people to come and learn how to be a citizen scientist for a day. It's fun for kids, students, teachers. We'll be holding it at the 8 parks in the here around Puget Sound. They're listed. You can find more information on our website about how to sign up and join us for the Bio Blitz, which is a treasure hunt for living organisms. And then, of course, many people, when you're thinking about the national parks, you're thinking about summer vacation and what kind of activities can you do. And throughout the summer, each park, whether it's Mount Rainier or Eby's Landing or Yellowstone or Joshua Tree, will be holding a series of events and activities, but you'll be seeing nodes of things happening on these dates. Special events that are particularly oriented towards family and kids. My personal favorite for the entire Centennial is the Every Kid in a Park program. And this is where the invitation starts. This is something that all of you can participate in. You can go to everykidinapark.gov and you can download a voucher for any 4th grade, 10-year-old, that they can redeem for they and their family for a free pass to national parks and all federal lands for a year, all right? And so all of you who are scout leaders or church groups or coaches or teachers or mentors, you can organize events or activities where you can provide 4th graders and their family with this pass to come and visit their parks. There are other organizations that are joining us too. A small local startup here has been working with us to hold a photo contest. Bing got 12,000 submissions during their National Park Week photo contest. If you go to Bing, today, actually, you'll see the winners of their photo contest. Those winners got 2 airplane tickets on Alaska Airlines and hotel reservations at the park of their choice to be able to take a nice vacation. Humana, a healthcare organization, has actually sponsored Senior Skip Day, and this is not for 18-year-olds, but this is actually for 65 plus, encouraging people to come out and visit the parks. And they've actually arranged for people who sign up to come and be able to visit for free and not have to pay their entrance fees. And these are kind of examples of what we are doing in terms of working with organizations, working with other partners in order to be able to have people come and enjoy their national parks. And one of the most important things that we have going on, as I said, is connecting a new generation of park visitors and supporters. And a primary way we do that is working with educational partners such as Nature Bridge. So let's have Stephen come up and talk.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. So I was in the dining hall at Nature Bridge out on Olympic National Park. I was last in line behind a group of girls that were there with their school, and I asked them about her day. And this one girl, she said she'd been out on the Elwha River and she had been investigating water quality. So I asked her, what did she find out? What did she discover? She said the river was very healthy. She was really confident. So I probed, how did you know? Well, she went on to explain that her classmates and her had looked for indicator species in the water, and they had found caddisfly larvae. And from that, she determined with her classmates that the river was pretty healthy. And so seeking to summarize this a bit, I said, these caddisfly larvae, they're the indicator species of a healthy ecosystem. And she said, exactly. And she paused a bit. And she said, just like me. Well, I didn't understand, and she knew it. And she gave me one of those looks that a 13-year-old says, where she didn't have to say anything, but she was really saying, duh. I still didn't get it, and she waited for me with the duh look on my face. And finally, she relieved me, and she said, I'm an indicator species of a healthy national park. Got it. So I'd like to think that Nature Bridge is part of nourishing these indicator species, not only in Olympic National Park, but in the 6 other national parks that we offer programs, including Yosemite and Shenandoah. And while not every one of these national parks has an Elwha River, each has a dynamic learning laboratory that our students are engaged in. But we're not alone in this endeavor. Here in Washington State, each of the major national parks has another organization that's dedicated to these kind of outcomes, the North Cascades Institute and Mount Rainier Institute. And around the country, there's even more. Let's take a look at a short video that displays some of the impact of these other organizations.
Learn Your Park is a collaboration between these education organizations.
Last year, there were 158,496 hands getting dirty at National Park Learning Centers.
That's 79,248 pairs of paws. And just why were we getting our hands dirty?
We are getting our hands dirty, discovering the life around us,
Learning through our senses.
conducting field research, being citizen scientists, creating art with nature,
Taking the classroom outside. Going back in time. We are getting our hands dirty.
hiking like John Muir, exploring like President Roosevelt, imagining like Ansel Adams, learning like Rachel Carson. We're getting our hands dirty because getting dirty is fun. Because we're wild and free, just like our national parks.
From Denali
To Cuyahoga, Point Reyes,
to Acadia. Canyonlands.
to Mount Rainier,
We're getting our hands dirty.
exploring and discovering America's natural treasures. Why are you getting your hands dirty? Discover a National Park Learning Center near you at learnyourpark.org.
So why all this effort? There's probably 30 or so environmental education organizations and national parks around the country, and each are seeking to create the next generation of park stewards. And that's surely a lofty and important goal, especially as we celebrate this centennial. But I think there's more. Considering the complexity of the environmental challenges that are coming in on our horizon, I believe that we're helping to create the next generation of environmentally literate citizens. And we're equipping them with the skills and tools needed for these challenges. Our programs build important links between in-class learning and out-of-class experience, and research tells us that strong experience-based learning supports deeper comprehension and complex decision-making skills. And yet in doing this, there are societal headwinds that are affecting youth. There continues to be a decrease in the attitudes and aptitudes in the sciences, especially the hard sciences. There's a growing disparity between the amount of screen time versus green time, and there continues to be a decline in the amount of times that kids spend outside in unstructured play. Current estimates suggest that American youth spend about 7 hours and 40 minutes each day interacting with their screens. Kaiser Family Foundation recently came out with a report, said that 6%, just 6% of American kids play outside on their own or with friends. This is down 50% in just the last 20 years. My colleague from Islandwood shared a story where he believes that the average time spent outside, and if you compare a US prisoner, a free-range chicken, and a US kid, that the US kid is actually spending the least amount of that time outside. And I think it was the author, Bill Bryson, who wrote about his childhood, and he suggested that he was not let back inside the house unless he was on fire or actively bleeding. Yet, I think there's reason for optimism. And after all, I'm in education, so I have to be an optimist, right? Well, the first is that Chip pointed out some of the great efforts that are happening, especially around fourth graders in the park. And let's thank Seattle's own Seattle Jewel for some of that initiative. Or consider the positive impact of and reaction to REI's choice to be closed for business on the day after Thanksgiving, starting the Green Friday phenomenon, or reflect the continuing impact of Richard Louve's book, The Last Child in the Woods. Or think about Washington State's recent investment in the No Child Left Inside Act, $500,000 dedicated to helping kids get in outdoor programs. And finally, we should look to some recent legislation around our educational policy. The Every Student Succeeds Act recently replaced the No Child Left Behind Act, and now federal education dollars can be used to support informal science learning programs like the ones that are here in our national parks. So perhaps we are at an inflection point. Perhaps these programs are moving from a nice to have to a need to have for our kids. And a final observation, when I look out at this gathering, and for that matter, when I look at the panel speaking for you today, we might represent a historic look of the national park, a typical national park visitor. Yet we know demographics are changing. This year, for the first time in NatureBridge's 45-year history, and when you think about that, 45 years, that's almost half of the total time that the National Park Service has been in existence. But in this year, for the first time, more than 50% of our students are kids of color. And this kind of demographic change is happening in our peer colleagues and peer programs around the country. And most meaningful perhaps, the majority of these students, it was their first time in a national park. And I think the deep message here is that these students are discovering that these are their parks, these are all of our parks, these are American parks. Our graduates grow up and they become members of other organizations, and I'd like to welcome Rob Smith to join us and tell us a little bit about how the National Park Conservation Association is supporting the Centennial.
Thanks, Stephen and Chip, and thank you, Rotary, for lending us your ears. I wanted to offer a little bit different perspective than what is often the case in terms of where national parks come from and how they're taken care of. It's not really about a senator, it's not really about a president, although they can play roles. It's about someone like this guy, and who came out from Ohio. He was a writer, went to work for the territorial governor at the time, and after a year of arriving, he said, well, there's this big mountain up there, Mount Rainier, so maybe I should go climb it. It's Philemon Beecher P.B. Van Trump, a common name perhaps, but no relation to anyone you may have heard of. This is a fellow who decided that he loved Mount Rainier so much that he wanted to be a part of it. He climbed it several times. He and a friend of his, Hazard Stevens, are the first two recorded people that got to the top of the summit of Mount Rainier. He wanted to share that experience, and he did, with a naturalist and writer named John Muir, who went on to found the Sierra Club, became a big advocate for wilderness and outdoor spaces, and was inspired by his experience in Mount Rainier, according to his own writings, to then begin advocating for national parks, places like this, not just Yosemite, and went on to form a national organization that PB ended up becoming one of the first Sierra Club members outside of the California, the Sierra Nevadas. So he inspired John Muir. John Muir inspired PB to become an advocate for places like this. Today, that advocacy is noted there. There's a meadow in his name, Van Trump Park, a glacier in his name, a creek in his name. This place exists just as he experienced it and provides the same kind of inspiration. He's one example of where did places like Mount Rainier come from. Here's another one. It's an old photo. It's 1958. Polly Dyer is still here in town, and she was trained as a secretary, became known as a wilderness and environmental advocate, and then heard that what should have been a protected place, Olympic National Park, the West Coast Trail, that wild stretch of unroaded beach, was proposed to be a site of a paved highway. She enlisted someone she knew, who happened to be on the Supreme Court, William O. Douglas Jr., a Washingtonian, to hike the length of that 60-mile or so stretch and bring attention to that, saying this should remain wild. As it was set aside for us, it should be set aside for the future. This is what one person can do. It is now remains that wild coast that you can enjoy just as she and Justice Douglas did. More recently, Clarence Moriwaki, resident of Bainbridge Island, also on our advisory council, decided that the story of the exclusion of Japanese Americans during World War II from the coastal areas following Pearl Harbor is something that needed to be noted. Bainbridge Island was the first place they were rounded up and left. Many were American citizens and yet were incarcerated. And that story needs to be told, commemorated, not forgotten. And he is really the spark plug behind working with a local group to go to a local park and commemoration site into one of the most recent national park sites. It is a unit of the National Park Service. That is one of the 4, I've given it away, that you can see from the Bainbridge Island Ferry on the way over. This is a work photo of what we do, believe it or not. Sometimes it's just telling the story. It looks like a lot of people having fun on a raft trip. That's true. You'll also see there's a writer for the National Geographic, the New York Times, Tacoma paper, TV station, a couple of congressional offices, some park advocates and scientists, and a former park manager in there too, if you know where to look. This is the kind of thing that groups like ours do in order to keep the story alive and to celebrate the removal of 2 dams on the Elwha and what that did to restore the native culture there for the lower Elwha Clallam, as well as bring salmon back. All species of salmon in Puget Sound use this river now, and they couldn't use it for nearly 100 years. Sometimes it's just direct service. The parks need money, they need supporters, they need people that love them. Providing those opportunities is something that we do. This is an example of a group of volunteers along with a park ranger, one of our staff folks, cleaning up Mount Rainier in advance of the winter season. So it kind of goes back to people like PB, an individual like you and me and the people next to you that are in a position to make a difference, working with an organization, trying to get the word out. That's where we come in. That's the service that we can provide as a nonprofit voice for the parks. And whether it's just getting out there and helping out and getting on the ground, or maybe that's where you start and ultimately you go and you can see Congressman Reichert in the lower left and then we're one of our own, your own Robin Grad here was a Rotarian sitting there in the U.S. Senate trolley on the way between the House and the Senate for meetings, advocating for park funding so the parks stay open, so that you see a ranger when you go there, so it's welcoming and that parks are protected. That's the way that we can continue on that legacy and in turn be inspired by people like PB and Polly and Clarence. We have a campaign to parallel and support the Parks Find Your Park. Ours is called Find Your Voice. What we do is say the things that while the Park Service is busy managing the parks, Nature Bridge and groups like that are out there teaching people about them. Someone's got to speak up for the parks as well, and it makes a really good triad, a really good teamwork. And that's what we do. And I wanted to give you 2 examples real quick before I leave. One is on each table. Stay in touch with us if you're interested. There's some information on NPCA or a way to find us. Coming up next Tuesday, we actually can participate on the front of an historic moment. The first national gay rights movement upraising commemoration LGBT park is being proposed for Greenwich Village at the Stonewall, or outside the Stonewall Inn in downtown New York City. But that's the place that story is told. But it's not just about Greenwich Village or New York City. That's about a coast-to-coast American pursuit of perfecting that justice system. There's a flyer on every table. There's more on the way out. Please join us at 7 o'clock over at Seattle University at Campion Hall next Tuesday to learn how you can really literally add your voice to creating one of the next pieces of the National Park System, hopefully real soon. So thank you. Chip.
So just to kind of summarize, we are inviting you to join us in your parks, your national park system, and join us in celebrating your centennial of your park system. There's a variety of different things that you can do, but probably the most important thing would be just simply come and visit. Come and visit and go and visit a park you haven't visited. Find a kid who hasn't been to a park. Find a family who hasn't gone and invite them to go along. If you want to become more involved, see about supporting one of the partner organizations, or coming out and being a partner with us too. So we hope that you'll come out in the centennial year to find your park, and here's more information about how you can get in touch with us, as well as where you can find stuff on the web. So do we have time for questions? Great. How do you want me to manage?
Yeah. Can you give us an idea of the deferred maintenance on the park system and how it's being addressed?
Sure thing. Our current, over the last 20 years, we've spent an enormous amount of time adopting kind of best practices amongst private industry in terms of understanding what it takes to for the upkeep and maintenance of the facilities. The current estimate is the current estimate of the maintenance backlog. That means the unfunded maintenance is about $11 billion. The annual operating budget of the National Park Service is $3 billion a year, and that does incorporate a fair amount in terms of maintenance, routine maintenance work that goes on. Yep.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for mentioning children of color and people of color and inviting us to our own park, because we need to hear that. We need to hear that. My question is this: are any of you 4 men Rotarians? Because we need this kind of leadership in Rotary. Do you have a membership in your hand? Are you members? Do you have a form? Is anybody giving them a form? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Both of those are very kind, but particularly the first. I think it is really, it is fundamental that all Americans understand that these places belong to all of you and that you are welcome to come.
Just recently, my wife and I visited, this is probably for you, Chip, Bryce Canyon National Park, and we noticed that it was just overrun with people, and of course the beauty was stunning. But what we didn't notice was a lot of park rangers in uniform. What's going on?
Well, part of what's going on is that people, were you there recently? Yeah, so tis the season to be in the desert Southwest to visit parks. It's a peak season, so there are a lot of people there. I just got back from Moab and Canyonlands in Utah. So it's a great time of year for people to go and visit, right? So that's why you're seeing a lot of folks. In terms of seeing staff, yeah, we are, through the generosity of the American people, providing your taxes on April 15th. That's how our $3 billion a year funding comes, right? The country is making, through the political processes, the country make choices in terms of how we allocate federal funding to different federal agencies. And the decisions, essentially since 2010, have been for essentially a flat budget. Sequestration in 2013, but essentially for a flat budget. That's at the same time that we have costs that go up. So labor costs go up every year, health premiums go up every year, energy costs generally go up. There are other fixed costs that go up at the same time that you have a fixed budget. And anybody who runs a nonprofit or a household expenses or a business, you know, you recognize if you have flat revenue and your expenses go up, it means that you have choices about how you manage what you do.
One more here. Here's Jack.
I might just build on that a little bit. It's Congress. Congress controls the purse strings for the National Park Service budget. This is why a group like ours is here. They run the parks. We can say, here's what they can't tell you. And we have members in Congress and the Washington delegation on the appropriations committees, which control those purse strings. They need to hear from people like you, like everybody, that America's best idea, our national park system, needs the best we can do to actually make it available for the record number of people that are coming. For the youth and other audiences, the people that aren't used to going to a national park need to feel welcome. They need to see a park ranger when they go. If you're not seeing it, that's a budget cut. If you're seeing a road under repair, that's money that didn't happen last year when it should have. The Park Service needs money. It's been going for about a decade with getting less and less as people have been going there more and more. That's where we come in. America's parks are a choice. That's a choice we should be making. It's one of the most popular things we do. I think that's a message to the decision makers. It is unlike anything else. It also is a great return on the investment. just making the business case for parks, it's between $5 and $10 return for every dollar that goes in terms of local economy and national and regional economy. They're the reason a lot of companies come here. They're the reason why Bill Gates decided that he wasn't gonna live in Albuquerque. He's gonna come back up here because he likes living around this place like all of us do. That's dollars. And so it's a huge investment, and we ought to be making that investment for so many reasons.
I spend a lot of time at the Elwha River. What's the difference between national park and national forest?
National parks are fundamentally in the preservation business. National parks are within the Department of Interior, and we manage to preserve and protect for future generations while welcoming people to come and visit now. National forests are in the Department of Agriculture, and they are managed under the concept of multiple use, or the highest good for the most number of people. So whether that is timber production or water production or mining or grazing or recreational values. So there's a wider range of choices that forests are managed for versus national parks.
All right, a softball for you. I'd love to know from each of you what your favorite national park is.
That's not a softball at all. That's a tough question. Gates of the Arctic. The spirit in Alaska, the spiritual sense that I have had in a couple times that I was there is with me to this day, and I felt very lucky to have been there. So Gates of the Arctic in Alaska.
The easy one for us to get away with by saying is, oh, it's the one I'm in or the one I just came from. The place where we took our honeymoon in Yosemite, the place where we took our kids, they saw their first grizzly bear in Glacier Park, the place where you're sort of brought to tears at some of the battlefields or Bainbridge Island. It's hard to pick one because it's sort of like saying, which was your favorite trip you ever took? Well, different ones have different memories. My favorite is going to be the one I'm going to go to next, wherever it is.
I get asked that question all the time, and the honest answer is it's whatever the last park I visited with my kids. So, which just happens to be Canyonlands National Park a couple weeks ago.
Earlier you mentioned the book Last Child in the Woods. We see an increase with the 7 hours a day on screen time of ADD and ADHD. Can you share a little bit about the correlation of when children are in the woods or actually get to spend time in nature, how that helps them with their whole mental health?
Yeah, there's some really interesting research that's suggesting that if you take the concept of being overtired, where if you're sleep deprived, I think we all, maybe any of us who are new parents, we remember those days where the things were not functioning well because we were sleep deprived. Some of the emerging research suggests that the trigger responses that we have to screens sets the brain into a pattern that is not identical to that, but mimics it in some of its behavior, its ability to solve more complex, challenging problems, recognition of patterns, many other things like that. The deep connection to the specific pieces that you have, there's been some correlations, but I don't think it's been as documented. But I think one thing that we should recognize is that sometimes our intuition guides us well around this, and science sometimes catches up with our intuition. And I wouldn't be surprised at all, Anna, at some point in time, whether we find that in a much more clear sense.
Jim is next.
The idea of bringing every fourth grader into the parks is a brilliant idea. That has to cost a lot of money. How did you come up with that idea, and how much does it cost, and how is it being funded?
Sorry. That actually was a White House initiative. It actually came from John Podesta, who is an advisor to President Obama until recently. that they were really looking to try to do something in terms of getting kids outdoors and to places of significant history. We are trying to operate within our existing budgets in terms of a variety of different youth programs that we are doing. There are a number of different organizations, including Nature Bridge and others, that are bringing private philanthropy to bear to provide support for being able to do that. Honestly, what we really need to do is we need to rely on, we need to serve as force multipliers to work with educators, school administrators, teachers, scout troop leaders, church youth group leaders, coaches, and work with them to encourage to take advantage of that pass, which actually has an $80 value, right? If you went out and bought an annual pass to come and visit a park, it costs $80. And to be able to help disseminate them to kids. And anybody can go to everykidinthepark.gov, it's the second item on that list, and click on the educator button, and you can register and you can download vouchers and you can work on providing those to kids. Sure. Are we done? Can I do one more thing? So just one really quick, back to my favorite park, which is just to spark your curiosity. Places you may not have heard of or been aware of, because everybody's aware of Mount Rainier. Everybody's aware of Olympics. Lewis and Clark National Historic Park at the mouth of the Columbia River outside of Astoria, Oregon. Wonderful collection of trails to be able to go on a hike. You might even see an elk. Eby's Landing National Reserve, right on the ferry going from Coupeville over to Olympic Peninsula. Fabulous trail hike on the Bluff Trail there, particularly in the winter, probably one of the most spectacular trails you can hike in the country. Klondike Gold Rush, right here in Pioneer Square. Tells the history of the foundation and the development of Seattle as a modern metropolitan area. Bainbridge Island, Japanese American Exclusion Memorial, just right off the Bainbridge Island ferry terminal. Places that you can go to for a Saturday or a Sunday, and encourage you to try to find out more about them.
What do you think? They want it, what do we have, 3 minutes? You have 30 seconds.
There was a question about the Elwha and the fascinating recovery of that river. On May 12th at Town Hall, there will be a series of mini speed TED Talks from scientists who are sharing their results. Look at the Town Hall website if you're curious about the Elwha.
Thank you so much, Eric and the Sustainability Committee for pulling that together. And Stephen, Rob, and Chip for being here. As a kid, dresses were not my thing. I preferred Rough Rider denims with reinforced knees. And for a time, my favorite doll was Evel Knievel and his stunt motorcycle. In my jeans with Mr. Knievel in tow, I was fearless. Until my family's visit to the Grand Canyon. Standing 2 feet from the edge of that massive abyss, I was not swept. I was petrified. I was so small. And if I fell, I'd be gone forever. And as Jim McCurdy knows, I am a klutz, so that fear was valid. Nature reminds us we are a tiny yet vital part of an exquisite and seasonal design. Veneer might entertain or make us feel brave, but nature teaches us reverence. See you next week.